Penguin Random House Audio presents American Oasis, Finding the Future in the Cities of the Southwest by Kyle Paoletta. Read for you by Andrew Iden. To Mama and Papi for making me New Mexican. Habiéndose de edificar en la ribera de cualquier río, de la parte del oriente, de manera que en saliendo el sol de primero en el pueblo que en el agua. In case of building on the bank of some river, they shall arrange the settlement in such a way that the sun may shine on the town before it shines on the water. Transcripción de las ordenanzas de descubrimientos, Nueva Población y Pacificación de las Indias, 1573. Transcript of the Ordinances Concerning Discoveries, New Settlements, and the Pacification of the Indies, 1573. I am crying from thirst. I am singing for rain. I am dancing for rain. The sky begins to weep, for it sees me singing and dancing on the dry, cracked earth. Alonzo Lopez, 1969. Preface. Heading east from the Pacific coast on I-8, the border of the desert southwest is obvious. Climb the steep, pine-studded Laguna Mountains in eastern San Diego County, and the landscape suddenly gives way. Pick an overlook, and the sculptural badlands of Anza Borrego unfurl before you, meandering up into a ridge that soon disappears into another dry valley flanked by more mountains, the basin and range pattern repeating into the soft infinity of the horizon. Or take the funicular up to the leafy 10,000-foot summit of Mount San Jacinto above Palm Springs to see how the pinkish little San Bernardino Mountains tower over the resort city's grid of mid-mod subdivisions and golf courses, several layers of silhouetted transverse ranges peeking through the gaps in their limpid wall of stone. Head for the desert country from the other direction, and the geographic distinctions are more vague. Following I-10, the land turns arid in the barrens of West Texas, which are separated from the rest of the state by a 100-mile swath of sun-bleached scar tissue. The earth littered with oil wells that form a vast, chaotic web spun by invisible geology, not surface terrain. Only once the brown earth crinkles up into the raw, prehistoric coral reef we call the Guadalupe Mountains can you be sure you've entered the great Chihuahuan Desert, which covers as much territory as the nation of France and extends in a parched mountainous ribbon all the way from San Luis Potosí in the center of Mexico to the southern fringes of Albuquerque. The Chihuahuan touches the Sonoran Desert near the border of Arizona and New Mexico, which, in turn, butts up against the Mojave in Southern California. Together, these deserts host the Southwest's largest cities and the overwhelming majority of its population. To their north, the highlands of the Colorado Plateau and the salt flats of the Great Basin represent one of the world's most spectacular arid landscapes, but harbor few of the necessary ingredients for creating a city. Each desert is home to a signature cactus. The Mojave has the Joshua tree, the Sonoran the saguaro. In the Chihuahuan, it's the somewhat less charismatic lechuguilla, a squat agave that arrests the attention of the visitor only after a dozen years of growth, at which point it has stored enough energy to shoot a stalk 10 feet into the air that briefly flowers into a fiery column of red and yellow before the entire plant dies. The autumn peoples of the Sonoran made syrup from saguaro fruit and protein-rich meal from its seeds, while the cactus's long ribs were used as a lightweight building material for shade structures. In the Mojave, the Cahuilla wove the fibers of the Joshua tree's spines into baskets and clothing. Up and down the length of the Chihuahua, everyone from the Tarahumara to the Humano made bowstrings from the lechuguilla's leaves, produced soap from its roots, and fermented its sap into pulque, tequila, and mezcal. Despite its popular connotation of nothingness, the desert provides. Still, there's a difference between human subsistence and long-tenured community. For a village to grow to a city of 100,000 people, then 1,000,000, then 5, well, not just any stretch of arid landscape will do. A metropolis can only sprout in the desert if there is water nearby, ideally in the form of an ever-replenishing river. What about topography? Surely there is something about this particular stretch of the Rio Grande or the Salt River that attracted settlers to it over any other. Say there are mountains, then, big ones, sizable enough to delimit a shift from one landscape to another. Now let's give those mountains a name. Frenchman, Franklin, Camelback, Santa Catalina, Sandia. The first misapprehension about the great cities of the Southwest is that they appeared out of the thin, high desert air, that their placement was as arbitrary as the logic governing their expansion. Why build there? The answer can be found in eons of churning stone. The earth created conditions such that when humans arrived at this coincidence of elevation and water, they could find nowhere better to go. Whatever connotation of nothingness the word desert may harbor, people have been living here for millennia. Indeed, the modern American Southwest is merely the latest iteration of a pattern of human habitation that extends back to the first people who arrived on this continent from Asia. Only in the colonial era did the idea of these deserts as fundamentally inhospitable take hold. While the Spanish originally came searching for cities of gold, and Anglos eventually followed with hopes of likewise extracting whatever wealth they could from the land, both sets of settlers saw the yawning, xerothermic province of thorny plains and ruddy mesas that extends from the Rockies to the Sierra Nevada as a vacancy to be filled. That Tewa, Dine, and Manzo peoples were already present when the first Europeans arrived was incidental to the project of empire. The same goes for the genealogy and tradition that had rooted those indigenous peoples in their homelands. The ancestors of the A'odham are known by archaeologists as the Hohokam, whose canal-fed farms once supplied tens of thousands of people in the Salt River Valley. At its height, their network of villages may have composed the largest settlement in North America. Centuries earlier, the precursors of the Puebloan peoples of the Rio Grande built stately cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde, Chaco Canyon, and the Pajarito Plateau. Never mind all that. For the desert to be mastered by those of European stock, raised to believe that a place needed to be green in order to give life, the region had to be understood as a vacancy in need of filling. Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca was the first Spaniard to chronicle a journey into what's now the Southwest. He survived a disastrous expedition that began in Florida in 1528, but morphed into an arduous overland trek to Mexico City after most of the party was shipwrecked near present-day Galveston. The trip took 8 years. Through that barren country we suffered nearly unendurable hunger, Cabeza de Vaca later wrote. He and his 3 surviving comrades would have perished just 2 years into their journey were it not for a group of Indians near the Guadalupe River who resuscitated them with the sweet fruit of the prickly pear cactus before providing guidance through the uninhabited wastes that lay ahead. Despite the kindness Cabeza de Vaca's party had been shown, the Spanish official who eventually received them at the outpost of Culiacan on Mexico's Pacific coast listened to his story and then advised him to turn around in order to restore the deserted, wasted, untilled land by sending to and commanding the Indians in the name of God and King to return to their valleys and tend the soil. Almost 400 years later, after the region had passed from Spanish to Mexican and then American control, an Anglo journalist named William Smythe called for the same in his 1900 book, The Conquest of Arid America. He envisioned the rapid settlement of Western America during the 20th century. It lies there now a clean blank page, awaiting the makers of history, the goodly heritage of our people. In both cases, the arid lands were conceived as a place with no past, and thus limitless potential for the future. For the Spanish farmers and monks who established Albuquerque, Tucson, and El Paso del Norte, the charge was simple: Make good on the Spanish Empire's claim to the vast interior of North America where no European had ever set foot. More than a century later...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?